inner leg. Yeah,
No,
it's real. Okay.
it's so real. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
I was gonna say, if it lags or if it cuts out, don't worry. I'll just add you back to the live once you come back onto Instagram. So I'll keep going
Awesome.
until I get you back until we finish. So don't worry about it. Yeah, we
Okay.
are gonna finish because this is important information. So before we get
Yeah.
into it, Carrie, go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us anything you want to about yourself, and then go ahead and introduce your business and what you do as far as pelvic floor therapy to everybody.
All right. I am Kari Craig. I am a pelvic health physical therapist in the east of Cleveland area, pretty much.
Hmm.
I have been a physical therapist for about 7 years, eight, almost eight, um,
Wow.
and doing pelvic floor for about four, a little over four.
Okay.
I have two kids and a dog. Um, yeah, so life is busy, especially now with COVID. But
Yeah.
yeah, so ironically, I opened my own private physical therapy practice
Yeah.
in
Right before
March.
COVID hit.
In March, yeah. So
Yep.
I have not been open very long. I have officially had two openings now, and this one's staying a little longer, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's
I've
awesome.
been back in the clinic since about mid-May. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so, and I'm still offering all of the kind of any sort of virtual telehealth kind of consultations as well for
Yeah,
anybody who's still not comfortable leaving the home just because of, the
everything going on
state of the
COVID.
world right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have talked before, Carrie and I, we have talked before on my podcast where we got to
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about the pelvic floor and about Kegels and some things of that nature. So
Mm-hmm.
check out the Your Birth Network podcast to check out the very first time that we got to chat. So we wanted to take it back a little bit and talk about what is pelvic floor therapy. So when you describe to people what is pelvic floor therapy, where do you start? Do you start with where the pelvic floor is located, or do you start with the benefits of pelvic floor therapy?
I kind of go back to the basics, right? So most
Okay.
people, when they hear of physical therapy, they think
Hmm.
of their knee pain or their shoulder pain, or, sometimes you'll hear that term of like physical terrace where it hurts.
Hmm.
So I kind of
Yeah.
try to take it back to that and tell people, like, I am a traditionally trained therapist, right? So I
Hmm.
spent the first 7 years of my practice in an orthopedic setting, or
Hmm.
my career in an
Right.
orthopedic setting, where I was working on things like knee and shoulder and all of that. Um, so go, buddy. Sorry.
It's okay.
And there he is. Sorry, did my
No,
best.
you're totally fine.
So I started my career as a lot of therapists do, in that outpatient type of setting. And
Yeah.
really for pelvic health really encompasses a lot of that. So a good
Mm.
pelvic health therapist really has some sort of orthopedic background because it
Okay.
helps to know how the rest of the body functions in conjunction with the pelvis. So
Mm.
what happened, at least for me, is after
Hmm.
a couple years as the orthopedic therapist, I had, what you might want to call like a calling to pelvic floor with some of my own
Hmm.
things. But so I started taking a bunch of extra courses, and really pelvic floor therapy is just an adjunct to traditional therapists. Sometimes
Hmm.
you'll hear there's some really big name pelvic therapists that'll call it just orthopedics in a cave. So basically, we're using the same sort of principles as we
Hmm.
use everywhere else in the body, but we're doing it in
Mm.
a place that is a little bit more intimate. So to really understand that, like, obviously we'll have to talk a little bit about the pelvic floor. Um,
Right.
so, like, the pelvic floor is, everything you see in red there, right? And those are muscles just like our biceps or our quads or our calves.
Hmm.
So, those are muscles that have specific functions in our daily life, right?
Wow.
Um, yeah. And so, just, for good, like, just overview, the pelvic
Mm-hmm.
floor, sometimes you'll hear it called like the 4 S's, the 4 functions of the pelvic floor. It
Mm-hmm.
has the sphincteric control, so that's controlling of the bowel and bladder, so the ability to actually pee or to hold pee or
Mm-hmm.
two. And then organ support, so support of everything up above. So that
Okay.
pelvic floor is called a floor for a reason, right? So it's the
Yeah.
floor of the pelvis. It has to hold everything above it
Mm-hmm.
inside, right? Stabilization, so that comes a lot into play when we're talking about like this posterior part. We're talking about your SI joints, which is always a
Mm.
buzzword, like SI joint pain or pubic symphysis pain. It has a huge role in stabilizing the pelvis,
Okay.
and stabilizing those joints to offload some of that. And
Mm-hmm.
then the last S is sexual function. So if these
Mm.
muscles do not coordinate, they do not contract, they do not relax well, you could have difficulty with sexual function in some capacity. So it could be
Okay.
inability to orgasm, it could be pain, it could be um, those are the big two, really.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of like just the very, very nitty gritty of what the heck the pelvic floor does. Because in order to really understand what pelvic floor therapy is, you kind of have to
Mm-hmm.
have a little bit, right, of a knowledge of what's going on within this pelvis.
Yeah.
It's my trusty pelvis that goes everywhere with me. So
You
literally goes
guys
to
saw it
and
on the
from the
photo.
office. Yeah.
Yeah.
I left one of the
Love it.
organs at home on accident the other day. I was like, shoot.
The
Yeah,
traveling
so
pelvis. I love
my traveling
it.
pelvis, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do you have any like specific, or anybody on here have any questions about just that?
Yeah, I think that a great point right now to make would be probably that if you are unable to hold like pee after you have a baby, which happens a lot, that it sounds like that's something that could be corrected with pelvic floor therapy. If there is discomfort with sexual activity, whether it is pain or whatever, it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
that could also be corrected with pelvic floor therapy. So you don't have to live with that. Is that true?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and
Because
that,
people think it's a badge of motherhood. Like my mom
yeah,
had 3 kids and she went to the bathroom every 5 seconds and she was like, it's
right.
because I have kids. It's like what you do after you become
Yeah,
a mother. And so I thought that that was a badge of motherhood. Like you just
right.
can't hold it
Right.
anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and unfortunately that stigma is still out there a little bit. I
Hmm.
think it's changing. I think it's getting better. There's a lot of people who do what we're doing right now,
Yeah.
that are coming out of the woodwork, and I think that's really helping with that movement of helping women really learn that that's not okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And because as much as we're trying, there are still providers out there that are telling women, whether they've had a baby or not, that those
Hmm.
things are just part of life. And yeah, you need to just
Good
deal
point.
with that, or,
Yeah.
yeah, try a couple Kegels or whatever. We don't
Right.
have to get into that, but like it's still a very sloughed off kind of topic in
Hmm.
our medical society. Although I definitely feel like the trend is positive.
Yeah.
It's still something that has to be like shouted from the rooftops that don't live
Hmm.
with it. Like just because your mom did, just because your grandma did, just because your friend does, doesn't mean you
Yes.
have to, right?
Yes.
So
So
yeah,
true.
yeah. So
Okay.
and yeah, so with that, like we talk about, you know, as a pelvic floor therapist, we treat
Hmm.
a lot of different diagnoses than like the shoulder pain or the knee pain that a
Right.
traditional outpatient clinic might treat. So we're talking about things like incontinence, and that could be urinary or fecal. So
Okay.
there is a component. So based on how the pelvic floor muscles actually are situated within the body, they control both.
Mm.
So that S for sphincteric is really the bladder and the bowel function, not just
Oh,
one.
okay.
So we're talking about incontinence for both.
Okay.
The other stuff we treat, which really isn't a diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
but pregnancy and postpartum care is like huge. And that can that's kind of like an umbrella where like the incontinence can
Oh,
go with that, the prolapse can go with that, which is another diagnosis we treat.
okay.
Pain can go with that, and that can be pain not only specific through that pelvic floor, but like through that
Mm-hmm.
pelvic girdle as a whole. So through that
Wow.
pubic symphysis joint, through the low back, through the SI joints, all of that is part of what we treat. Okay.
Okay.
Um, and then like oftentimes, like I don't know if you happen to see my shoot. Am I here?
So you're back. Yep,
Okay.
you're back.
Um,
You were saying you don't know if I happen to
yeah,
see.
sorry about that.
It's okay.
My post the other day on pelvic pain.
Yes. And
Are
that's what
you
I
there?
wanted to
Okay.
ask you about too,
So
pelvic pain during pregnancy. Yeah.
yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
pelvic pain during pregnancy is huge, but also
Yeah.
like pelvic pain can mean a lot of different things. So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different, that's another like one of those umbrellas, that there's a lot of different diagnoses that situate kind of under pelvic pain. And
Okay.
I don't have to get into that, but they can be pregnancy or non-pregnancy related. And so
Oh, okay.
that's, that's also something to just note. And I won't go into all of that, but one of the bigger ones that I would think more people who watch this might have heard of is stuff like endometriosis. Like
Yep.
that's one of the conditions that having a pelvic floor therapist within your kind of collaborative care team, it can be massive in terms of like
Oh,
managing your symptoms. So, but
okay.
pelvic pain in pregnancy, and that's another one of those like kind of
Mm-hmm.
no things that people just say, oh well, it'll go away once I have a baby, I just
Yeah.
gotta wait another 6 weeks, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And it's, you don't have to live with it. Like you can't, there are things that we can do. I pride myself as a physical therapist, and this is part of my pelvic health stuff, because I don't think
Yeah.
I wasn't quite this way with my orthopedic, as I'm very heavy
Mm-hmm.
manually based. And so when we talk about women in pregnancy and pain, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's extremely powerful and extremely helpful to get your hands on somebody and figure
Yeah.
out like what the muscles feel like, what the tension in the muscles feel like, where some like muscle releases need to happen, potentially where some strengthening
Mm-hmm.
should occur, but to really help a woman kind of get through the remainder of the care. Um,
Yeah.
and I see this question, so I'm going to jump
Yes,
right through it.
from Matt. Yeah, Matt is
Yeah,
asking, is pelvic floor therapy only for women? Are there any cases where men might need therapy? That's a good question.
that's a fantastic question. I actually had it on my list because I wanted to make sure it was hit. Um,
Yeah.
Men also have pelvic floors, right? So we hear
Okay.
about it more because of
No.
women. And, I think, I don't know, it's all over Instagram anymore, and that it's mainly women talking about it.
Yeah.
But men have the same muscle structure. It just looks
Mm.
a little different, right? So
Okay.
instead of having the vaginal opening here, there's obviously no opening.
Right.
These muscles on either side here are still there. They just run completely
Oh,
up and down. So
okay.
men, there are, sorry, almost dropped my computer. There are men who have pelvic pain, testicular
Mm.
pain. A lot of men
Okay.
who have had prostate cancer or prostate surgery. Um, Men, especially as they age, can have
Mm.
incontinence. So
Okay.
same things that, well, kind of the same things that women experience, the same kind of changes in that muscle tension or muscle
Mm.
tone, the ability of that muscle to contract and relax can cause issues in men as much as women. Erectile dysfunction is another
Wow.
one of those. All of that is under the umbrella of pelvic PT. And so
Oh.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah.
correctable for men with therapy as well.
100%. Yeah.
No
So,
way. Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the men's side of it is lagging behind like the
Yeah, for
female
sure. I had no
portion of
idea.
it.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
like we're
Okay.
seeing, like we were talking before, we're seeing more and more come out about women
Mm,
and pelvic floors and what like therapy, and more women gaining the knowledge that this is a thing. And I think our research with the men needs to follow suit as well, because it
absolutely.
is
Wow.
also something they can address. It's just
Yeah.
the anatomy is just a little different. But really, like they still, those four S's we talked about before
Still
still
apply.
apply. Yeah, it's
Mm.
the same thing for them. So yeah,
Wow.
it's
Okay.
kind of crazy.
Fantastic question, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
great
appreciate that.
question.
I
I'm
didn't
so
even think
glad
to
you
ask that
asked.
question. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was awesome.
yeah.
Okay, so men can also experience incontinence and things of that nature, and pelvic floor therapy actually works for men or for women. Okay, that's good to
Sure.
know. What else did you want to share with us about pelvic floor therapy?
So another good point that I thought would be important to bring up is really the
Mm-hmm.
idea of our healthcare in general is kind of,
Mm.
we're reactive as a society, right? We
Yes, instead
react
of
when
preventative.
people think, yeah. So
Yeah.
when we start to have issues, we react. Well, what
Yeah.
happens if we start to be proactive in our care, right? So
Mm-hmm.
since we're talking about like, especially for you and what the population you deal with, we're talking
Yeah.
about women in pregnancy. So what
Right.
happens if there's a pregnant mom? She really has no issues at all, she has no pain, she's having an easy pregnancy, but she hears about pelvic floor PT, or she's educated about it, and she's like, I really think I'm going to get checked out now, see if everything's functioning well, and see if there's anything I can work on during therapy to help me afterwards.
Mm, that's a
That
good
is
point.
ideally, that is where I would like the society to be. And you can even take it one step
Okay.
further than that and say, before a woman gets pregnant, like, should we take
Mm-hmm.
a look at them and see if they have any issues?
Mm,
Not to talk about like too much about my personal experience, but I actually was somebody who, had I had known more about what I do now when I was in college, I would have
mm-hmm.
I would have known a lot more going into my pregnancies and how to manage something that I ended up with later on. So
Okay.
it can be something that could be extremely beneficial for people to just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like get ahead of the ball game, make sure everything's going the way they want it to. And
Yeah.
then to top that off, like we can actually talk a lot about, in order to deliver a baby specifically,
Right?
we that pelvic floor has to relax and to lengthen and to open. And
Yes.
that's what we teach people to do. So like to make sure people know how to do that,
Mm-hmm.
it can be really, really good. And then just even just setting a program for people to be like, this is what I want you to continue to work on to keep your
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy healthy in terms
Yes.
of your body, your pelvic floor, your kind of bowel and bladder function, because that obviously changes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like in that's always something I like to bring up, because I just think
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times I hear, why didn't my doctor tell me this? Or how come I've
Yeah.
never heard about this? Or whatever. And if we could just make this a norm, like some of the other countries have done,
Mm-hmm.
how much better in the long run things could be, and how many things we
Yeah.
might be able to prevent. And I don't know. I just think that's a really, really important thing to discuss, because I mean, if we
Yeah.
think about, again, if we go back to traditional therapy versus pelvic therapy,
Mm-hmm.
in traditional PT, it's not unheard of to see somebody before a knee replacement to strengthen all those muscles around that
That's
knee,
an excellent point. Yeah. Yeah.
to make sure the surgery goes well. So what's
Right.
wrong with like creating awesome strength in the muscles that are available? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because with pregnancy, our abdominals, they lose the ability to contract a little bit because of the
Yeah.
change, but our pelvic floor can still maintain good kind of range of motion and tone throughout that
Mm.
entire time. And so why can't, why not prep for this major event of
Yeah.
labor and delivery, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that'd be a great thing for everybody to know,
Mm-hmm.
because I truly think we could prevent a lot of things if we could make that more of a norm.
Yeah. While we're
Yeah.
here at this point talking about this, I just want to make a quick note because you talked about this on the podcast, but I feel like it's
Hmm.
really relevant to put in right here too. About the fact that for pelvic floor therapy, like depending on where you are and what kind of insurance you have, that you don't need a referral from your provider. You can go to a pelvic floor therapist and they can follow up with your provider. And of course, you will have to look into that because it's insurance specific. But I know when I talked to my doctor after I had my baby, she did just mention Kegels, and I thought that I would need a referral from her in order to move forward with pelvic floor therapy. So I didn't move
Yeah.
forward with it because at the time I didn't have a referral from her. So I don't want
Yeah.
that to get in the way for other people.
No,
Yeah.
it absolutely doesn't. So if you are somebody that goes and you're like on it and like, hey, I'm having this issue. I know pelvic floor PT is something that might help me, and they
Yeah.
just kind of slough you off. Technically, you can still go. I mean, so it's something
Yeah.
to still consider. Um,
Okay.
and sometimes I will even tell people like if I'm a firm believer in like really collaborative care. I don't
Mm,
think for people to like fully heal, there's a lot more than just the muscular portion of pelvic PT. But I like to be involved with other people's providers because I think that's where results get made, is when
yeah.
people are talking to each other and working together to figure things
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, you don't need a referral to come see me. You can
Okay.
call me. Yeah. Yeah. Ohio, actually, most states now you do not need one.
Okay.
There's some restrictions depending on the state, but
Oh, okay.
in case there's any non-Ohioans that listen to this, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So check into the rules. You might not need a referral, but if you can get a referral from your doctor, you do have a conversation with your doctor and your doctor is, proactive with you and sends you on, perfect. But if they
Yeah.
don't, it's something that you may not need their blessing to move forward with. So
Yeah.
just so you know. Okay, so what else about pelvic floor therapy do you want to share with everybody at this point, or like myths or anything like that?
Um, well, we kind of touched on a lot of those myths. Like a lot
Okay.
of the myths are like you don't have to live with the incontinence. You don't have to live with the pain with intercourse.
Okay.
You know, Constipation's one we didn't talk about. That's a diagnosis we treat. Um,
Oh,
that's,
okay.
that's a big one that can play into pelvic floor dysfunction or be a result of pelvic floor dysfunction. So that's
Mhm.
something, that we look at as well. So,
Okay.
we touched on a lot of, one of the myths was women only have pelvic floors or it's only for
Okay.
women. So we're
Yep.
really kind of hitting them, a lot of the really good ones.
Okay.
One of
Awesome.
the other ones that I think is really cool right now,
Hmm.
is that you can kind of prevent diastasis recti with pregnancy. So
Hmm.
diastasis recti is like this huge buzzword right now, right?
Yeah.
You look everywhere. It's July is apparently diastasis awareness month. Um, you know,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
That's awesome. Okay.
yeah. So what doesn't have a month anymore, right? So
Very true.
but with pregnancy, our abdominals have to change in order to allow that baby to grow. So
Right.
under the influence of like hormones and the changing in our like actual body weight and
Hmm.
composition, the abdominal muscles, the six pack muscles are going to to separate a little bit. So
Yeah.
you'll see studies that'll say something like 66%, only 66% of women have diastasis, but in all reality, almost 100% of us do. It's just
Oh.
anatomically what happens. The
Mm-hmm.
Where it can become an issue is after after pregnancy, if it does not
Mm-hmm.
resolve and it's the abdominals are not kind of coordinating the way we want it to. So that's
Okay.
where kind of the diastasis check comes in, that you'll kind of see people doing, where you're actually checking like how much width is there between the two, that six-pack muscle. And what
Mm-hmm.
I always try to stress to people is how deep is it? So it's not only about the width, it's about the depth, and it's about how the muscles are coordinating together, because that's really
Okay.
the end goal. Like, it's, yeah, obviously we don't want this giant gap in our belly, but if we can learn how
Yeah.
to coordinate our muscles correctly, we're going to decrease the prevalence of injury, right? And that's really
Mm-hmm.
the 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 crux of it.
Okay.
So
Wow.
that is one of the myths that is totally out there, and
Okay.
kind of relevant for right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a little plug. I am doing free diastasis checks in the clinic. Uh, the last week in July, I have 2 days blocked off. So if it's something you're interested, anybody's interested, just
Okay.
let me know.
And I will get the link from you, and I'll also get the graphic
Perfect.
from you with the specific dates and the location, so that way we can properly promote that for you too, because that's so important. And with this being the awareness month, how
Right.
appropriate, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of like, once I learned about it, that was kind of like the catalyst to try it.
yeah,
It's something fun. A lot of women have heard about it. They've maybe
yeah,
read about it online, tried to do the checks themselves. You know, I why not offer a free 15-minute screen where you're just kind of taking a look, and I could tell you,
yeah,
hey, like this is something that you might benefit from having some treatment for, or hey, you
yeah.
are good to go, you are rocking and rolling,
Yeah,
so
better to know
yeah,
than not to know, right? Let's be proactive about
100% proactive, not
that.
reactive. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Hey, Lady D,
So
and hey, Heather Sky. Thank you guys so much for joining. We are here with Kari Craig. She is a pelvic floor therapist. She's also a physical therapist, right? That's how she started her career, and has been a pelvic floor therapist with that specialty for the last 4 years. So we were just dispelling myths about the pelvic floor. We talked about the 4 S's. We talked about the fact that women and men have a pelvic floor, and that therapy for your pelvic floor can also treat things like bladder incontinence, constipation. It can also help you just all around, because the floor is literally the bottom, and so it supports everything else. So we talked about a number of things that could relate to the pelvic floor and how you can heal that through therapy, including sex, right? You don't have to deal with pain and discomfort during sex either. So yeah,
yep.
so we cover a lot. We just finished talking about diastasis recti. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've seen it pronounced a couple of different ways, to be
Yeah, it's fine. It all
yeah.
means the same, right?
Okay. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to let everybody know that this month is Awareness Month for diastasis recti. And basically, when you are expecting, right, your stomach gets big in order to accommodate the space for the baby, and then that goes back down once you have your baby. And so we were talking about the space that comes between your six pack, right, that area, muscles,
Yep.
and how if there's a dip in that middle part of your stomach, that could mean that you have diastasis recti. It's actually pretty common in about 100% now of people, that if you have had a baby, then you are experiencing that. And Kari is saying that during the last month in July, she will offer 2 days. Well, she'll do a free 15-minute screening. So if you are in Cleveland, Ohio, if you're willing to travel to the east side, I know you're located on the east side of your office, right?
I'm in
Okay.
Chardon. Yeah.
Okay,
So I'm
Chardon.
in.
Okay, I thought it was
Yep.
Chardon. I was like, I didn't want to say it
Yeah.
though.
Well.
Okay, I
Yep.
think it's at Mother Rising, right?
Yep. I'm in
Okay,
Mother Rising Studio. So right on the
okay,
square in Chardon, if you're familiar with Chardon. Yeah.
okay, awesome. I'm like,
Yeah.
I thought so, but I didn't want to say. Okay, so
Yeah.
in Mother Rising Studio in Chardon, Ohio, 2 days, the last week in July, she's going to be doing free 15-minute screenings. And I'll make sure to get the graphic from her and post it on my account. That way you guys can see the dates and the times. If you
Awesome.
have any questions in the meantime, please DM her, please email her. Those will book up really quickly because that has been a buzzword lately. And so a lot of people are now aware of it and want to get help with that. So
Yeah.
don't wait, don't wait, don't wait. Contact her immediately. And then
Yeah.
where can people find you? Like your website, social
Mhm.
media, how can people find you online?
So I have it all. Who doesn't, right? So
Right,
you
you
can
have to
follow
these
me
days.
obviously here on Care Pelvic Health Instagram. I have
Yep,
I also have the Facebook page. For women, I do have a closed private Facebook group that I
yep,
put a little bit more than I do on my Instagram, like as far as like details on how to rectify things and tips and
yeah,
tricks and different stuff like that.
yeah.
So
I'm
it's
in the
a
Facebook community. It's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Thank
an
you,
amazing
thank you.
resource. Yeah.
Yeah, I that's actually how like all of my business and everything started. But and then to keep it consistent, it's carepelvichealth.com. If you want to check
And
out
that's
my website
K.
with a care with a
Hmm.
K.
Yep.
Little play on my name, but yeah. So that's oh, and the Facebook group is called, and I don't know if you can link this as well. It's
Yeah.
Care for Your Pelvic Floor, and more, because I talk about more than just the pelvic floor. I talk about smart body mechanics after baby or just in
Mhm.
real life. I hit on a myriad of things that I do as a pelvic PT, and kind of
Yeah.
little tips and tricks and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's Kari Craig, and that's where you can find her. She is like my favorite pelvic floor therapist, so I wanted to have her come back on and do a live. She also was a guest on my podcast. So if you guys want to check out the Your Birth Network podcast, we talked all about like Kegels, and we talked more about urinary incontinence, and what you can do before, during, and after pregnancy with your pelvic floor. So that's on the podcast, and she is
Yes.
episode lucky number 13. So if you want to check that out, it's called Just Do Your Kegels, and that is on the Your Birth Network podcast. We're on like Apple and Podcast Addict and all of those other great places. So you can check
Awesome
out that.
places.
Yeah, and definitely check the replay out of this video if you came in late, because she had a lot of great information at the beginning about the 4 S's, the pelvic floor for men and for women, and then what pelvic floor therapy actually is, the benefits of it. And if you guys want to work with her virtually anywhere in the world, you absolutely can contact her. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you are local, you can also come to her office in Chardon in Mother Rising Studio. Okay,
Yep.
so that's going to do it for us. I don't want to hold you guys up too much on a Friday. I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sticking with us all the way to the end. And Kari, thank you for lending us your time and your expertise. I
Welcome.
really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. I always
Of
love
course.
talking with you. So
Yeah, I love having you. I always learn something new every single time.
yes, that's the
Yeah,
goal, right?
absolutely. Never stop learning. That's what I love
No,
about our
never stop.
industry.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay. Well,
All
you
right.
know who you guys are. You know who we are. If you need to find us, if you need to reach us, reach out. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.